Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to Wednesday night. I was supposed to have a baby, Insta Live with Amy Klein from the Trying Game Infertility book. I always say that I'm excited, but I'm excited again today. I am excited for this discussion with Amy because she's a prolific journalist, writer. Journalist obviously means writer, but prolific author talking about this world and this struggle that she had personally and how she gave this advice about her struggle and other people's struggle in the New York Times blog, which she did on a very regular basis over the course of 3 years. And I am just really looking forward to having her here so she can talk about her book and talk about her work, talk about her journey, and why she decided to write this book, why she felt compelled. Obviously, she was doing this work anyway, but I'm really looking forward to having her here. I see that she's on, so let me go find her. I think maybe she's having a little bit of difficulty getting on here, so let me just make sure. Hold on. Okay, she should be here in a second. Welcome to the wonders of technology. Here she is.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
It is. It's always the adjusting, like getting the camera right, getting the technology right. It's all good. It's all good. So welcome. Please. I mean, I gave you a very botched up introduction because I'm certainly not as eloquent as you. So please introduce yourself for the audience.
Hi, I'm Amy Klein, the author of The Trying Game. It started, I started writing about my infertility journey back in 2012, and then the New York Times asked me to write a column following my journey. We were all so naive. She said, write about it for 3 to 4 months, and then we'll turn it into a pregnancy blog. Well, 3 years later, I was still writing about it because it took me, I guess, 10 doctors, 4 miscarriages, 3 countries, 1 baby. So yeah.
Okay. I mean, I was going to say, I mean, there's so much to even say about that, but I think what I'd love to hear about to start out with is, first of all, I mean, you've been through so much, and I mean, it's at a time, what you and I spoke about was this journey for you happened at a time when people weren't talking about infertility and pregnancy loss and treatment in the way they are now. So can you sort of take us back to your mindset, your thoughts, what was happening then, and why, also why the New York Times thought that this was important enough to write about it at a time when no one else was doing it. Can you like bring us back to that time period?
Sure. So I got married in 2011, and like right after that had my first miscarriage. And then shortly after that, I had another miscarriage, but shortly after that was introduced, I guess it was 2012 when I met with my first fertility doctor. And I've always written, I'm a journalist and I'm a reporter, and I write about health, and I've written about travel, and I've written for a lot of Jewish newspapers. I've been editors of Jewish newspapers, but I've always written about what I'm doing in life. I always kind of see myself as a guide, whether it's jumping out of a plane, collecting honey for bees before Rosh Hashanah. I even had a dating column in Los Angeles.
Wow.
And I started writing about, like I wrote about J-Date, when it first started, and people thought it was so crazy, you going on the internet with a date on you where you're going to get murdered. So like I wrote a big article following like 6 months of my dating before people even know what it was. So when I stepped into this fertility clinic in New York, I was like, wow, this is a secret world. How come I've never heard of it? You hear vaguely, you're like, okay, if I don't get pregnant, I'll just do IVF and I'll have a baby. Like that's the whole sentence. Like I'll just do fertility treatment. You don't really know what it is, and you barely know how your own body works. And then I step into this clinic, and there are women, lined up from 5 in the morning because they have to get to their law office jobs or their C-suite jobs. And it just felt like this weird world that nobody was talking about except, back then it's hard to believe there was no Instagram and there was barely Facebook, but there were no Facebook groups, there were no secret groups. So the only place there were information were these like baby boards, I guess it's kind of like a subreddit, but you didn't know what anyone was talking about because they were using all these acronyms and it was, and as a journalist, I also have access to a lot of scientific stuff. So I felt like I was having all this like magic baby dust, with the little angel heart wings emojis that people put on the one hand. And then I had these like very scientific journals where I was trying to like use my journalism background to figure out what's going on. And I was just like, why is nobody writing about this? I just actually started sending things into the New York Times. Like I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to have a column. I just said, this is crazy. These are crazy things. And I think, to their credit, they recognize that most people don't know what IVF is, and most people aren't willing to write about it or talk about it or share their intimate details of the journey. And, I think they wanted to help people, but they also wanted to give, like a bird's eye view into what it's like. And, when I started writing, I thought, I didn't know I was going to be successful, but I thought that if I were successful, then I would put together a memoir about it and a memoir about my life, about what happened. But like something weird happened, like between the time when I started, there was no information. And then after I had my daughter in 2015, it seemed like, and then not 2015, but when I like climbed out of early motherhood and
postpartum
and
yeah
everything, when I could take a breather and like look at this book that I wanted to do, I just thought, what, it's a different, there's too much, 2016, 2000, there's too much information out there. It's become like almost overwhelming. And I was so glad. I was so glad that there were all these groups, groups for every, repeat miscarriage, IVF over 40, secondary infertility. So, and that's been happening in the last few years, and, Instagram's accounts like yours and every celebrity. So then I just felt like, okay, there's too much information. Is there a way that I can combine my story and like just try to help people through the process? Because it's like, where do I start? How do I find a doctor? And then, people email me all the time, and I just kept, and even on these Facebook groups, I kept seeing the same, questions over and over again. And it's like the same one. And it's not about questions, like, how do I deal with my miscarriage? What do I say to my best friend who wants me to throw her a baby shower? Why does my husband say he wants to do fertility treatment and he's not helping me at all? So it seems like a lot of the same question. I mean, the technology changes. Back when I was doing it in, there was no real PGT in 2000. There wasn't that much, and people were.
Explain just in case there are people who don't know what PGT is. Just explain
So
that.
the technology changes, and there's now something. It was there, but there's now something called genetic. There actually was there. It's not right to say it was there, but most people weren't doing genetic testing of embryos, so that meant that they were probably putting in 3 or 4 embryos at a time. And then as the technology improved, people still ask, should I genetic test my embryos? And I'm not in favor. I have a lot to say on that subject as well, but I'm just saying the technological questions are going to change. These days doctors they don't want to, twins were a thing, multiples were a thing of the past.
Yes.
The doctors actually want to reduce the chance of multiples, and they don't want people to have twins and triplets because it's not so healthy, because the babies are born early and it's not so healthy for their mother's body. But so there's different technical questions, and I hope that the technology keeps improving and the numbers go up, but I feel like the questions are still the same and a lot of the emotional journey is the same.
Right. That's 100% true. That even as we have these medical advances, it's absolutely true. These still the same old questions, as you were saying, of like, how do I manage this? How do I manage my husband? How do I manage my best friend? How do I tell? How do I not tell? How do I grieve? When should I grieve? How do I know I've grieved too much or too little? Like all of those questions are exactly the same. Those are the timeless questions that people are still struggling with. And so, yeah, I mean, and so enter your book. So tell me the process. So was it just like, okay, you had written this blog for the New York Times about your life and about this journey that you were taking, you know, delving deep into the IVF process and everything that that entailed. And then so it was, how did it then get to the book? Like what was the...
So I actually did write a memoir during early motherhood. Like I wrote a more complete memoir of everything that I'd been through and, you know, expounding upon the column. But I also just, I just realized that, you know, first of all, there were lots of things I didn't go through. You know, I'm not single. I don't have endometriosis. I don't have PCOS. Those are medical conditions. I'm not gay. You know, I don't need a surrogate. So I just felt like there was so much more that I wanted to tell. And like, I just thought, what was the book that people would need right now? What is the book that I would have needed? And I really wanted it to be like the A to Z guide to infertility. You know, at one point we were calling it the Girlfriend's Guide to Infertility, but we actually got a cease and desist. I think I sold it on that title. We got a cease and desist because the Girlfriend's Guide is apparently trademarked. Good thing to know. Check your title before you write a book. So you know, and I'm glad I wrote my story, and I'm glad I had it. And some of it made it into the memoir were relevant, but I really wanted it to be an emotional and medical guide. So you know, in every chapter, I interview a doctor and I interview lots of patients and sometimes therapists and scientists, because it's like, you know, you start off thinking like, oh my God, do I have infertility? There's that, you know, like, oh shite moment where you're like, I thought this was going to be the easy part. I thought that was going to be the fun part. And it might be. You know, I always tell people, I'm like, you buy my book, you get pregnant a month later, you know, give it to your best friend. You know, I'm like using it as a phone stand right now. So there's many uses for it.
Exactly.
I think, you know, so that's like the first thing that you're going through is like, oh my God, am I really going to have so much trouble? And what do I do with those emotions? So
this is so relevant. I'm just gonna interrupt you for 5 seconds. It's so relevant that you're discussing this right now, because I'm in the middle of talking about pre-marriage or pre-conception education for women, for high school kids, for women, because there's so much out there that potentially could be avoided if people knew what their fertility status was. Like, I mean, I'm getting inundated with messages over and over again about people talking about how they have diminished ovarian reserve. They never knew they had diminished ovarian reserve, and would have, if they would have known, maybe they would have, before they even got married, maybe they would have done egg freezing, maybe they would have done X, Y, and Z. Like, there's so much that now, like, they waited to have children because they weren't ready right away when they got married, or they weren't serious about finding a partner because they thought they had so much time. You know, it brings up so many different implications. So I just had to interrupt you for 5 seconds.
Well, I do want to teach a college course, but I just have to think of a way. Like, I would love to work with you on it. You know, I think a college course but how do you get people to take it without scaring them?
Right.
You know, like our bodies ourselves.
Right.
I mean, I can't tell you on the other end of the spectrum, you know, how many people I've spoken to who, you know, I think in chapter 2, I talked to a friend who was 40 when she started, and she told me, she's like, oh, well, I went in my 30s to a gynecologist, and she said, you have a fibroid and it's not important and you don't have to deal with it now. You know, and it would have been so much better to deal with it at 32 than at 40. She had to take like a year off for the surgery. So not only there needs to be education, but I think there needs to be something more done with gynecologists to be the first place to talk to people. I think we're afraid, you know, we're afraid of the word fertility. We're afraid of it. We just think, okay, you know, and I wrote a story about why women know so little about their fertility. And I was the same way. At 32, I was like, well, I'm single. I'm not going to have a baby on my own. So why do I need to know any of this? I'll deal with it when the time comes. I mean, it was a different time. Egg freezing was still experimental. And I think even though today, though, there's a lot of women who just hear the word egg freezing and they're like, oh, not interested. I'm not even going to think about it. And I always say, I don't care if you freeze your eggs or not. I just want you to know about your own body.
Exactly.
Like, I don't have any skin in the game. I can't tell you if egg freezing is going to work or not. But like, we know so much. Like, we're so empowered. about our careers, about our choice of partners, you know, about our ambition. And it's like we can't know about our own bodies. We can't know, like we only know how to not get pregnant. I mean, I don't know about you, you know, maybe, I don't know, maybe when you take a Taharat Mishpacha class, you learn some of that kind of stuff in Jewish law, but like I knew how not to get pregnant. I didn't know that there were only like 4 or 5 fertile days. You know, I can't tell you how many times I was in a panic because I thought I was pregnant. And I look back now and I'm like, you could not have been pregnant
Right.
then.
Right. No, I mean, I think so. This is exactly, I mean, I don't want to get so far off topic because I really want to talk to you more about your book, but this is exactly what is being discussed right now in that, you know, how do we get education to the younger generation so that they're empowered to know what they need to know and can make the choice as to whether to go further or decide, okay, thank you very much. Like, I know how my cycle works. I know when my fertile days are. I know I have this condition. But like, I'm going to put that information away, but at least to have the information, as opposed to like so many of the messages I'm getting are like, yeah, I thought like you just get married and like you just talk about like the days I can't have sex with my husband. And like, you know, I thought like the minute you have sex, you have a baby and like, that's the end. And like, little did I know. Like, it's
Right.
just, it's wild. It's really wild.
It
It's
is.
really,
I think we're just afraid. I don't know why we're afraid to know these things.
yeah,
And then we also think that if it doesn't work, okay, you just go to a doctor and then you get knocked up and that's it.
right.
You know,
That's the
it's
other
over.
end of the spectrum. Yes, exactly.
And I definitely speak to a lot of people. I mean, I speak to a lot of, I do have a section on young and infertile and how does it feel to be, you know, like I called it, and I can send you the link afterwards. I called it the woman in the waiting room. You know, you sit in the waiting room, whether it's the gynecologist office or the IVF office, and you look around at all these other people and you think, oh, that girl has it easier because at least she's so young. And meanwhile, you don't know that she's like, I'm so young. What am I doing here? Why do I have to waste? You know, I don't have time. I have to build my career. Why am I so young and all my friends are having babies, you know? So there's so many things that different people go through. Just sitting there in the waiting room, you know, there could be, God forbid, someone who, you know, has cancer and has to freeze her eggs right away because she won't have any eggs afterwards, or she might not have as many eggs afterwards. So you don't know what people are going through. And, you know, I have a chapter on LGBTQ and on single women and what you need to do to freeze your eggs. And as I said, I don't care that I want people to be empowered to make their decision. And, you know, one of the things is like I think every 30-year-old or should have, you know, their test done. It should be part of your standard gynecological workup. And then you should have a consult. Okay, this is what it means. This is what your fertility is. You might not want to have children at all. Some people, interestingly, you know, I did a series of stories years ago for Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, on egg freezing. And a lot of the women who started the egg freezing process like learned so much about their bodies during egg freezing that they decided to have the baby on their own. So it's just interesting to learn about your body and learn how it works and how it doesn't work.
Wow. I know that you see this woman who's just commenting right here. She
I
says,
saw.
yeah, I mean, it's so sad. She's saying, before my OBGYN gave up on me, he just said, stop eating challah and kugel and I'll become pregnant. And she's still waiting. I mean, it's just the kinds of things that happen to women. It's awful. It's just
Right.
awful.
So you know that women's pain is taken less seriously at the doctor's office. You know, I was working with someone who doesn't have children. She's much older. She's in her 60s. And she said she was like for a week every time she had her period when she was younger, she was in bed all week and people would just say, "Oh, well, periods give you cramps, menstruation gives you cramps." And she wasn't until she was in her late 30s or 40s that she realized that she had, you know, the endometriosis, and that was a big problem. So, you know, I guess, yes, it would be great to teach younger women, like, no, a period is not supposed to be debilitating pain, or if you have no period, you need to check it out. You know, just to know, to really, like, I know that there's that book, Your Body, Take Charge of Your Fertility,
Right.
but it's more like, be informed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's this is about, I feel like we're preaching to the choir a little bit, but
Right. I know.
I mean, this is just about having the knowledge and then figuring out what to do with it. Okay. I want to tell me more about the different aspects, like some of the other chapters in the book. And also, like, I know there's some really funny parts. Like, I know there's a lot of, like, besides the medical piece, because each chapter, I know you're so meticulous about making sure the scientific piece and the medical piece is there, but there are also, the book is a good read. And so I want to hear, I want you to tell everyone more about that piece too.
I mean, some things are just like really funny, you know, like you're putting all these shots in you and you're going to the doctor, and then your husband like gets handed a cup, and in the olden days it was like some grubby magazines. These days it's like at least they have an iPad, you know, so that's crazy ridiculous. But you know, like I have a whole chapter on one chapter on alternative medicine, because it used to stress me out. Like it just, I mean, I know that a lot of people read Rebecca Fett's book, It Starts with the Egg, and I'm all for improving egg quality, but the whole thing just stressed me out. Like, oh my God, I have to clean my environment. I have to get rid of toxins. I have to change my diet. I have to do this. I was like, I can't. I'm already stopping this. Like, how am I supposed to have a life? So, like, I wrote a very funny sidebar called, like, Your Fertility Diet. You know, you can only eat butter churned in the morning, you know, things like that. Just think
while you're standing on your head on alternate Wednesdays, right?
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
I mean, you know, the funniest thing is they say that people always tell you, oh, just relax, don't stress, you know, because stress causes infertility. And I'm just like, if stress really caused infertility, then no one doing IVF would have a baby ever. So it doesn't make any sense. The only way stress really can stop you from having a baby is if you're so stressed that you do not ovulate. Like, that's technically the literal definition. Or if you're so stressed that you can't have sex or go to the doctor. Like, if you can manage to have the egg meet the sperm, whether it's in the laboratory or in the body, it doesn't matter how stressed you are, you know?
Right.
So that whole thing, just so many things drive me crazy. Like, you know, the just relax people,
It's funny. I shouldn't say it's funny, but I always think, like, when people always used to say to me, like, you know, just relax, like, don't be stressed, like, you know, if you just relax, I kept thinking to myself, like, my grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and I know that there were so many babies that were born during the Holocaust, and that had to have been like some of the most stressful times in history. And so, how is that even possible? Like, their nutrition.
I hope you brought up the Holocaust right away, because that always wins the argument.
Right. I feel like that should always win the argument, right? Like their nutrition was poor. They didn't know where they were living. They were constantly thinking that their life was in danger. Not thinking, their life was in danger. Like, and they still got pregnant and had babies. So how is it possible? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make it right. So I also have a series throughout the book. I was just looking throughout the book. I have a series of I don't know if you remember Mad Magazine. It might be before your time, but like snappy answers. You know, snappy answers to stupid questions. You know, they used to have that. So it was like snappy answers to people telling you things like, I have the regular edition. You know, like, oh, just relax. Like, no, you're stressing me out. You know, I'll relax and you go away. And then I also have like snappy answers to silly like snappy answers to stupid donor egg questions, you know, like, oh, your donor's so cute. Can I go out with him? No, you can't. It's my donor. It's not a dating service. So, you know, they're just, I mean, I guess, thank God I had, right. Someone just said I got pregnant when my mom was dying. So yeah, sorry about that. But I guess I wish like my grandparents were in the Holocaust, so I could have said that, because I'm just going to say my friend's parents were right. Exactly. So I think it's, I think like, at least I had some space, you know, to make jokes about it. Because while I was in it, I didn't think that there were things that were funny. I didn't think that much of it was funny when I was there. There were moments that were funny, but it seems funny in retrospect, especially. So.
Right. No, look, I mean, nothing is funny when you're going through it, you know, when you're in the moment, but there's so much of this that's just ridiculous that almost, like, you know, we all have to laugh a little bit of at ourselves about it. Like, you know, the notion of, you know, getting up in the morning, like at some ungodly hour, like sneaking out of your house, like getting to the clinic. And then like when you're there, it's almost like, you know, you can't look at anyone. No one looks at you. Like you're like, everybody's embarrassed. It's just, the whole thing is like ridiculous. It's ridiculous on its face. And like, you know,
Right, and
so
like,
much
oh my
that,
God, you're going to the doc. Like, I just remember when the doctor kept calling me like Miss Klein, Miss Klein. I'm like, we've known each other for like 4 cycles already. You don't have to leave the room. You know what I mean? I'm not getting a bikini wax, and you could call me Amy.
totally, totally. Right. It's enough.
Um, you know, this wasn't funny, but I guess if it was like a cinema, I think it would have been funny. Like, I just remember the time where you could still go on the subway. And like, I was on the subway with my friends, and this woman got on, and she's like, I'm homeless, I'm hungry, and I'm pregnant. And I'm like, what? I cannot. And my friend thought she's like, Amy, come on. I'm like, no, this is ridiculous. I can't. She can't be pregnant.
Right.
So, yeah. So, I definitely wanted to give people, you know, like just not to feel less alone. And I know people are on like boards and they can talk to each other, but you know, sometimes it feels weird that the only people that you could talk to are people that you don't really know, and you're in the same boat until you're not in the same boat.
Right.
And then, you know, everyone in the outside world wants you, you know, they want you to be happy for someone else. They want you not to be so sad. They want you just to relax. I mean, there's so many things. Even I think, you know, it's 10 years later and people still put their expectations on you.
Very much so. Very much so. Okay. Tell me more also just about like, how did you decide like what things you wanted to include, what things you didn't want to include, like what felt important when you were putting this together? Like, you were obviously in the mindset of the person who had gone through this, and so you wanted to, like, that was your audience, you wanted to speak to those people. But what, like, was there something else that like you weren't sure if it should go in, and then you decided to include because someone gave you the suggestion? Like, I'm just like, I'm always interested in hearing in the process of how people come together and come to produce like a product as wonderful as yours.
Thank you. I, you know, when I sat down and I realized, okay, who am I talking to? I'm talking to people who might have infertility, who are not sure if they're gonna, you know, maybe because the first part is actually, the first 5 chapters are before you even get to the fertility clinic, like what you need to know about your things, how to deal with your regrets, you know, things before you even, you know, chapter 6 is how to find a doctor. So the first part is just like getting your house in order. I just kind of thought, you know, I guess I was writing a book a little bit to myself, like what I needed to know from start to finish, even though mine was a little backwards, but, you know, because I started with miscarriages and then I went to the clinic. But, you know, so I just, I did speak to a lot of people, and I tried to speak to them though, only while I was writing the chapter. And, but I knew that there were things that I didn't go through and that I wanted to write about as well. You know, like I didn't have a surrogate. I didn't have endometriosis, but I found something like really, like in talking to a lot of the people, and we were talking before about the emotional journey, but I was saying like the emotional journey, I couldn't believe how many, like this gay couple that I was talking to, I think they actually had a baby. But when I was writing the book, they were they were on Twitter called Two Beards and a Baby. And this guy was telling me, he said, oh, you know, I wanted to use my friends as a donor, and then they wouldn't let me because she was 32. So we used the clinic's donor, and she had 18 eggs and none of them fertilized. And I'm like, oh, basically like it's the same story. You know, you started differently. You know, I have another friend who had a baby and then was having secondary infertility and decided to use a surrogate, decided to adopt, I'm sorry, and has been through like 3 failed adoptions. I'm just saying, like, there's, you know, no one has, it just seems like I want to give people the space to feel whatever they're feeling, you know, like none of this like fake Pollyanna positivity. We're just going to be positive this whole time, because not only is stress going to prevent you from having a baby, but if you're not upbeat and positive, you know,
Yeah,
like
don't get me started on that. Yeah,
if
yeah.
you're not
I
Pollyanna, you're not going to have a baby.
right, right.
Um,
I can't handle. That's all toxic positivity. It's just
right, toxic
me.
positivity.
Yeah,
And I just kind of, so like that was so shocking when I just spoke to people who, whatever, froze their eggs, did it on their own, got a surrogate, just like they had setbacks and things cost much more and people were insanely insensitive sometimes. And, it's like, what is that phrase in French? La plus ça change, the même chose, like the more we're different, the more we're the same. So that
yes.
was really shocking to learn. Um, I just, like I have a whole chapter on work-life balance. And that was like super important to me because first of all, I wanted to know the law, like the legal side, which is so hard to
Right.
find. Like, can I claim infertility as can I claim it? What do I tell my boss? I have a letter, what you're supposed to say to your boss, and how you're protected under the ADA. But also, like you were talking about, like who do I tell and when do I tell them? And how do I get what I need from other people? you know yeah, so that was one of the things that the third section of the book is really the emotional part of the journey. I devote I devote an entire chapter to religion. It's not only Jewish, but it's heavily skewed towards Jewish because that's my experience. And spoke to some really great rabbis and some really great religious doctors, but also Christians. This one woman in my book, she was just like, I had to go to church and there were 6 baby carriages, and I just had to walk through the pregnant bellies. And then she said, she's
The
like, oh,
more we're different, the more we're
right,
the same.
exactly. And then she said this was a beautiful story, but she just said, this group of girls, when they finally said they were pregnant, this group of girls were screaming and she didn't understand why they were so happy. And they had been like fasting once a week for a year for her, which is like a
Right. You
really
wrote
beautiful
about this.
story.
I know it was an excerpt from your book, but that was
Yeah.
one of the articles that you just wrote.
Yeah, that was, I just put it in.
I'll put it up in stories after this. Yeah.
And then of course in the religious chapter we talk about miracles because that's an annoying thing that people talk about. And actually one of the women who said she had a miracle told me that it's an annoying thing because she wouldn't tell anybody, like she found that it was a miracle, but she wouldn't tell anyone to wait or expect for a miracle because, if a miracle could have happened, it should have happened a while ago. But I just
Right.
think, like I can answer your question exactly. I mean, I came up with the book trying to think about going through the process in the most methodical order and then filling it in for every person along the way, whether like, should you do alternative therapy? Um, and interestingly for the book, there's not like that many exact medical, like there's one chapter on IUI, then there's another chapter on IVF with, like interviews with Dr. Schoolcraft and some of the top names in the business, Dr. Levine, and I tried not to keep it only in New York, California, Boston, Chicago. How do you deal with miscarriage? How do you deal with repeat miscarriage? How do you know when it's time to move on, whether it's to a new clinic, to a new doctor, to a new procedure, to, donor eggs, donor sperm, surrogacy, adoption. So I try to think like in order of my own specific journey, but also, and then just after repeat miscarriage and also stopping, when is it time to stop? Which is not an easy thing. And I don't know in the religious community if that's always an option, but it is something that people have to do.
Yep. Absolutely. Look, I mean, I think every couple and every couple makes that decision for themselves, sometimes in consultation with their rabbi, sometimes not.
Right.
But absolutely. But the saying no, the I've had enough is something that's extremely important because sometimes it is enough. It is enough.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes people decide after they stop, maybe they'll, pick up adoption later, or they'll try donor eggs in a couple of years once they come to terms with grieving for what is lost. Because, I mean, this whole process, if you just think about it, it's like a grieving process. It's grieving, you know, having easy fertility, having an easy family. It's grieving having to spend money. It's grieving loss of like being happy for other people. You know, it's a whole, and then you're expected to push on. And I guess, you know, like I wish every rabbi and every doctor would just read some of the chapters, you know, like especially the chapter on baby envy, you know, like that whole expectation of why can't you be happy for me? Why can't you just? And I mean, I could start a whole book
Why can't
called
you just?
Why
Yeah.
Can't You Just?
Yeah. Why can't you just?
And I mean, it even continues, you know, I talk about pregnancy and motherhood after IVF and especially after pregnancy loss. And, you know, I had 4 losses. And I don't know how maybe someone would feel if they just had IVF with no pregnancy losses, but anyone who's had pregnancy loss, whether through IVF or not, knows that, you know, pregnancy is a very trying time. And that's probably how I came up with the title of the trying game. It's just very trying. And, you know, like my doctor, who definitely was a miracle worker, he's not alive anymore, so I could keep promoting him as much as possible. But he was a repeat miscarriage specialist. And I said, I'm not happy. And everyone keeps telling me, why aren't you happy? Why can't you just be happy you're pregnant? And he's like, Amy, you are not going to be happy until you're holding that baby in your arms. Like, you just won't. So I felt a little better. But even in pregnancy, it continues. Why can't you just be happy?
Right, because it's the trauma that's reverberating, because you remember, especially when you have pregnancy after loss. I did as well. It's many times. It's just you keep reliving those moments, and you can't. It's exactly as you just said. It's exactly as you just said. You can't be happy until, or as your doctor just said. I should say a lot of says and says there, but. Really, it's until you hold that baby in your arms. It's the anxiety. It just doesn't go away.
I had a few brief moments in the second trimester where I was like, maybe, but then yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so what would you know, in closing here, what are a few words, a couple of phrases, I mean, that you would say to someone who's just embarking on this journey? Like, what would you say to them to give them that chizuk, that support? Like, they're just starting, they're married, how many years doesn't matter, but they know that this is something that they're going to have to go through because they haven't gotten pregnant thus far. What would you say to them?
The first thing is, you know, in chapter 1, just don't panic. Like, you might not have to go through this whole long road that everybody else goes through. So don't panic. And the information could be really, really overwhelming. So the first thing is don't panic, because you might get pregnant. You know, it might just be a blocked tube, you know, and maybe my journey was like a little less optimism every way, but I really just kept thinking it was going to work each time. And I don't think that's a bad way to think or behave in the world. You know, maybe it's just one little IUI is going to help the sperm get to where they need to go. Maybe that tube will get unblocked, or maybe, you know, there's plenty of people where IVF works on the first try. And it's, you know, and then you get on these blogs and that sort of thing. You get on these blogs and you get like super panicked. Oh my God, I have to know everything. I have to know should I take letrozole? Should I take this? You know, that's one thing I don't go into in my book so much is like medical protocols. Because once you go down into that deep dive, it's never ending. But, you know, ask me today what my meds were. I could probably tell you for each cycle. So the first thing I would say is don't panic. And the other thing I would say, and that's, you know, is just, you got to be kind to yourself. You got to like hold that space for yourself and know that whatever you're going through, whether it's just, you're just finding out that you're having fertility issues, or your husband has fertility issues, or that it's going to take longer and it's going to be more expensive, or if you know, God forbid, suffered a miscarriage, you know, the world is going on. Maybe it's not going on so much right now, but like the world is whizzing by and you have to take care of yourself, because, you know, when you have well, I wanted to say like a real illness, you know, if you had a heart attack, you'd be in bed and you'd be lying and people would be serving you food. And, you know, infertility, according to the World Health Organization, is a disease and it should be treated as such. So it doesn't mean that you need to go around and being like, hi, I'm infertile, you know, or like, but you need to just be like, okay, you know what? It's okay if I skip that breast today. I don't need to be there. The world's not going to fall apart. I don't need to go to every wedding. I don't need to go to every simcha. You know, like my theory in life, and it's before this happened, was I give what I can give when I can give it. So that means
Amazing.
sometimes when I'm really have a lot of energy and I have a lot of things going on, I'll help people. People will call me, you know, and then like, let's say, for example, the pandemic happened and I was full-time childcare plus trying to work plus trying to promote a book. And there were just some things that had to fall away. Like I just had to be like, can't do it right now. And I mean, you have multiple children, so you know, your life is probably narrower than that. Like you need to take the space for yourself, whether it's, and then, you know, the last piece of advice is after you're kind to yourself is people don't understand always, and maybe they understand a little bit more than they used to, but people don't understand. So tell people what you need, you know, tell your mother to stop sending you articles of miracle stories. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
Tell your
Yes.
best friend that you tell your best friend that you love her kids, but you just can't sit and listen to like story day after day about her complaining about her kids because it just makes you mad. Tell them or take the space that you can because it's just like, you know, this it feels like it's forever because it could be a long time. You know, like I went through 3 years, and if you count my pregnancy, it's 4 years because I was like nervous about my pregnancy. So I went through 4 years. I was in 3 countries. You know, I was in Israel. I did a lot of things. I had 4 miscarriages. I had so many doctors, and it felt like it was going on forever, but it's only like a slice of your life. Hopefully, I mean, it will only be a slice of your life because there's only a finite amount of time and money that you could put into this. And, you know, hopefully it will end with a family, one or many kids. But just like try to keep that in mind, like to be kind to yourself, tell people what you need, and just it's only a hopefully finite period of your life.
Amazing. Amazing. Amy, thank you so much for being here, for sharing the world of your wisdom through your experience, both here and also in your book. I'm grateful. We're all grateful.
Thank you. I
No,
love
no, I
you
was
more too.
no, I look, this is what it's about, right? It's about just trying to help the next generation or the next person who's suffering, trying to make it a little easier for them.
For
So,
sure. And I also wanted to just mention, I know it's on the thing, I just wanted to mention I'm working with Hadassah,
yeah,
the Zionist Women's Organization. They're getting into the infertility advocacy. It's called Reconceiving Infertility. And I'm just excited because, you know, they're a big women's organization. And the fact that they are starting to recognize that this is, you know, that they're getting into it, that means that the Jewish community is going to be more educated about it.
I can't wait. Hadassah is incredible. Okay, tell people. I mean, you wrote here where people can buy the book. This what is PRH as opposed
That's
to?
Penguin Random House, but you could get it
Okay,
on Amazon. I just didn't have, I can send the link also. You get it on Amazon. If the sounds of my voice doesn't bother you too much, I actually also read the audiobook, which was
amazing.
totally fun. And you know, get an extra book and like leave one in your doctor's office because I haven't been able to like get them out to doctor's offices yet.
And I saw. I mean, the books are not expensive. I think I just was on Amazon and they're $7.95. I mean,
I know.
this is not an expensive book. This is, you know, a cup of coffee and a muffin. Like that's what this is. So go
Well,
get the book.
there's also a part like you could, you know, tear out the page. Like it says, "Dear pregnant friend," there's a letter. You could here, "Dear parents, how to hit your parents up for money." So just like rip out the page, you know, and give it to your parents.
Amazing, amazing. Amy, thank you, thank you,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much. Okay.
Okay.
Take
All
care.
right. Good night,
Bye.
everybody. If you want to find Amy, find her on the Trying Game Infertility book. Find her there on Instagram. You can message her, message me. And that's where we are. Okay. Good night, everybody. Good night.